Devin Townsend is up next, and Lightwork. This is the first major, full-fledged Devin Townsend album since Empath in 2019, which very much to me, at least, feels like an album of the before times. You know, like our lives have certainly recalibrated a fair bit since we greeted Empath so enthusiastically. Since then, I would say Devin has been present, but not high profile. You know, he's actually been quite productive because he's released things like the Puzzle instrumental album. I think there was like a twin project for that called Snuggles. He's done soundtrack work for CBB shows. Like, he's been about doing some different things. But at the same time, those feel like they've almost been downtime projects for him, like recouping after the last no-hold-barred, exhaustive ones.
Well, I mean, Empath was kind of like everything, everywhere, all at once, Devin in it. Like, it was like the most large-than-life, big Devin Townsend record imaginable. So, almost makes sense that he'd need a couple of records to kind of like just do something a bit low-key, and especially with the state the world was in, felt like kind of just a natural way for him to go before coming back with another big Devin Townsend album like this.
Well, I think he's been a bit low-key since the Devin Townsend project sort of hung it up, because when he was with them, or when that was going, it felt like there was a crazy new Devin thing every year, whether it was a record, or some crazy live show, or a movie, or a sequel to the Ziltoid album, something like that. And since then, even though his music hasn't necessarily become less maximalist, particularly Empath, which might be a contender for his most maximalist album ever, he seems to be settling into the more of a, as I say, slightly low-key, or low profile compared to what we came to expect in the early 2010s.
I think it's more that he's become... I mean, part of when the project was hung up is that, you know, that was like an active full-time band, essentially, and he's kind of settled more and more into just becoming this sort of free spirit who will go and do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and exists in his own artistic orbit, which almost feels like a natural kind of inevitability and, like, you know, a new plateau that someone like Devin was always going to reach. They're not going to be constrained by just, you know, one band or one particular touring circuit they have to go on or whatever. And I guess in these years, heading into something like Lightwork, this analogy is going to sound much, much harsher than I actually mean, because I love Devin Townsend as an artist and I'm always going to be wanting to hear what he puts out. But after Empath, it was almost like coming out of Avengers Endgame, looking at the lineup of new Marvel projects, like, all right, that's kind of a cap on something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Empath was so huge and so comprehensive and felt like such a marker of, you know, an era for Devin Townsend's whole musical legacy, that no matter, you know, what different direction you fire off in afterwards, the next something is going to feel just a little unexplored by comparison.
Yeah.
And Lightwork for me has been, after a couple years of sort of, you know, just watching Devin doing his thing from afar, a good reprimer of, like, how to listen to just a normal Devin Townsend album. Because this record isn't as massive as Empath. It's not as momentous and not one that feels as significant for, like, his body of work. But it is good. And it's grounded me to just go, firing off in any different direction and getting what you can out of it while you're there is kind of the joy of being a Devin Townsend fan.
I think this is one where I had actually kind of gone, well, we can't do Empath again at this point, because that album is so insane and massive and full of so many ideas and turns. I was kind of like, I feel like this is going to be an album that does kind of like focus in more down in one direction. And I think there's still quite a lot going on in this record, but it is quite a focused Devin Townsend album in a lot of ways, where it does kind of like have a key kind of identity and core component to its sound that like does drive a lot of it forward.
Well, he actually worked with a producer on this one. He worked with Garth Richardson, who produces lots of the Biffy Clyro albums.
Yeah.
And, you know, normally Devin Townsend very much like operating under his own rule there. But it feels like less of a nightmare to make, to wrangle all of its elements in place as Empath was, and concurrently, it's less demanding to listen to. Really, like the records that this reminds me of at different points are Key, Ghost, and Epicloud. And I think overall you could probably say there's something of a sweet spot between the latter two of those in terms of like how new age Ghost is, and then the kind of more upbeat pop of Epicloud. But Key has this kind of like awkwardly bumbling along gait to it, which I say as a positive. Like, it's a really unique, fun character on that record. And this album does something similar, but in a prettier, less menacing guise of just getting like a really simple, quiet kind of drum and guitar groove and riding it for a bit and seeing what fun little hooks and melodies you get out of it.
Well, I think maybe this is why I've warmed to this album as much as I have. I was a big fan of Empath. I really enjoyed that. But I did think there were moments on that where Devin, I don't want to accuse him of this, but maybe was being explicitly mental for the sake of it. Like, it still sounded cool, but I think there was like a deliberate attempt to, throw everything at the wall. Whereas this, it feels like he's kept that sort of, tropical, maximal tone, but he's applied it to something a bit more direct. So he's kind of gone for more of a progressive pop thing. He sounds a bit more like Tears for Fears and Ecstasy than a lot of the other things he's done. And I think Devin's actually at his best. And this is across all the different styles he's done, because I think he's been able to do this in plenty of ways. But when he's able to evoke a genuine euphoria in the listener, and I get that feeling from City, from Ocean Machine, from Ghost, and this might be his most direct attempt at that. And I think he hits it out of the park. I think this is an excellent record. I think I might even prefer it to Empath.
The warmth and just kind of like the uplifting sound of this record is just, it's so easy to get swept up in, because it's so bright and like it just picks you up in like, it's in the vocal melodies, it's in the sound of the synths, it's in how like that whole like wall of sound of just like all of the noises, like, because where it's like almost like on the surface level feels quite basic and direct in the melodies and all that, there is so many sort of layers and elements that are just like piling up to create this sound and make it sound as vast and uplifting as possible. That I do just think this is a really easy, like, again, it's one that took me a while to figure out just how much I liked it, but then also my last couple of listens, it really clicked with me, and I just kind of just got swept up in the euphoria of it.
Yeah, I think when you say the most direct thing, that goes to Epicloud for me, which feels the most like bombast maximalist pop.
Yes, definitely.
This is more kind of the minimalist pop, sibling that's gone via something like Empath. And as you say, you mentioned the tropical thing. Vacation on this literally feels like almost like a B-side from, a more chilled out version. Moon People, a really low key kind of single as an example of this, but there is like a sticky pop sensibility in the vocal lines there. That
very Matt Bellamy-esque in the vocal lines on that.
No, okay. I was going to say, it just like, it makes you like, even here, there is that pop thing with how less, I guess, immediately attention-grabbing this is compared to either something like Epicloud in its bombast or something like Empath in how wide-reaching it is. And this album, I think, does really well, like, slow, quiet hooks that gradually become more lodged in your head each time they escalate. Like, Moon People does it. Call the Void really does it with like that almost like pop chorus that leans into the the freak out part. Celestial Signals has a fucking amazing chorus on it as well. And I was looking at these going like, man, Devin is such a talented melodic songwriter. You could change the feel of these choruses just a bit and have them be straight up mainstream pop songs. But here they're in this like strange, blissed out prog rock come easy listening record. Like, he's really just in his own little space with these kind of songs.
I think Lightwork is one where like the chorus, every time that sort of just comes in, that tell me there's another bit, it's like that's the magic of Devin when he can just hit those choruses.
Oh, that one is I love when Devin Townsend sings like he's on a fucking Broadway stage,
Yeah, totally.
And the chorus in Lightworker is so powerful and graceful in that. And then he's like, there are even parts on this where he's able to hit like a point of shrillness with his screams, where he's so like unbelievably like on pitch with them and so precise that it doesn't even like puncture the kind of the beauty of the aura of the record. Like, it's just really something on a technical level. That
more sort of shrill vocal delivery, but where it's still so in line with the melody that it never becomes kind of like uncomfortable to listen to. It's such a like, that is the magic of him as a vocalist, where he can just nail that. And it's something he's done loads across his album, but here when it just hits on those moments, it's excellent.
Yeah, and then sometimes it's so uplifting. Like when he hits the no shame in failure in Celestial Signals, it has the same kind of like wrap you in a blanket of assurance and positivity vibe that like Spirits Will Collide on Empath does.
Devin as a vocalist is, in some ways, he's the best thing about his own music, and also one of the things that I think could turn people off who aren't accustomed to that sort of vocal style, because he is a clean singer, but it's a very commanding imperial style, which is slightly goofy. But yet somehow he's able to sell these songs like Call of the Void, the chorus in that Don't Freak Out, that super comforting element. He's able to do that, giving a full-on proper heavy metal vocal performance. And that's quite a tough balance to make, particularly when he's not backed with a style of music which ordinarily would suit that. Like, as we've said, it's sort of like a soft, progressive pop sort of style. I actually think the production on this, I didn't realise it was produced with the help of Garth Richardson, but I think this might be one of the best combinations of his production and songwriting to date, because his wall of sound technique can sometimes feel a bit suffocating and artificial, which means it doesn't actually sound particularly heavy. But when it's applied to something so rich and soft and delicate, it's actually a really nice juxtaposition that I don't know if I've heard before.
Yeah, there are like parts of this where, even with it being, again, a less immediately attention-grabbing record, there is a lot going on sort of in layers and stuff that makes it, when you're inside it, still really colourful and really bright, and like Empath did. It's a real like sights and sounds kind of record, while being the calm to that record's intensity. And from there, like you look at something like Equinox, which has like the male and female vocal interplay. There's a really like weird central instrumental melody on that that's like otherworldly. It's like being on like an interplanetary carousel or something with like those tinkling like descending piano scales. And you through that the record, like, I mean, the baby sound at the start of Heavy Burden I find slightly unsettling every time it comes in, but like Dimensions is a really out there one for like, this becomes like this pacey like electropunk groove or something, like via it goes like through like a freako jazz solo at one point, like quite bizarre little tangents.
It's that one-two of Heartbreaker and Dimensions, where this album in the middle just it does go a bit mental.
Heartbreaker
like
synths are full on sci-fi, yeah.
Like when Heartbreaker beginning with that, you've had like Call of the Void, which is this wonderful melodic song, and you get this big blaring synth where you get the first proper like guitar-driven tracks, and you've got all these electronics blaring at you, and it is a really like interesting kind of like divergence in the middle of the record, and that goes on with Dimensions. It's that weird break in the middle of Dimensions where it's like this weird kind of like techno thing going on with like a guitar solo as well. Like, it's mental, but like those two songs come in the middle of the record just kind of feels like this deviation before you come out of it in Celestial Signals, which again is just like really nice and uplifting again.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Dimensions is the most like urgent industrial part of the record, but it doesn't necessarily feel heavy to me, that song, in the way that, Hear Me did on Empath, which is full on like SYL throwback. This is more, again, like another weird, strange little fucking interstellar detour in the flow of the album. And like earlier on, we're talking about the sci-fi synths and stuff. Lightwork has the orchestration that's so Disney. It's like Twilight Force have just turned up and started playing for a few seconds before the song like dips down. So for me, there's like the fact that these songs are so based on, a core couple of melodies that aren't like showstoppers, but they will surprise you in how memorable they actually are and how much they do worm their way into your head. And then around those are where all like the weird extra bits will come in that are diverse enough to kind of catch the ear and keep you engaged, without those being like the main draw or the point of the record. It's a good example in songwriting.
Well, I think that's also one of the most impressive things about it, is how, when I first listened to this, I thought the first four songs each sound like they could be the end credits of a feel-good movie that's set on Neptune. And that's the sort of thing that you think, in principle, sounds like it would get exhausting. Just like, I just think about the thing you said about him being on Broadway, just that huge bombast, that just deliberately euphoric. And yet, there is a tonal shift throughout the record. It does have its ups and downs, like Dimensions, as you said, in the middle, being that sort of freeform space rock freakout, really divides up and shakes you awake halfway through. And I think it's really a clever moment in the track list, because in principle, that sort of thing should get tiring. And yet, for me, it never even came close to that. I could listen to this over and over again.
Yeah, I don't think this is really built to be one of my favourite Devin records. I think it'll probably go in along something like Ghost in that regard, which I like very much, but I only reach for in like a very specific frame of mind. But like I said, getting that was almost like a good reset for me of like how to actively engage as a Devin Townsend fan who is gonna take you from record to record to these different places and frames of mind. So I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah, no, I very much agree in that. I do. This is a very specific mood record in that if I, again, just want something that's going to be kind of like a bit more of a chill listen that you kind of like just drift along with and enjoy the nice melodies and warm sounds. Like this really hit the spot for me. And again, it took a little while to kind of like set myself into that mood, even though I kind of knew this wasn't going to be another empath. But I've really come around to liking this record and just finding it something that's like really hit a spot for me.
Yeah, Devin Townsend, Lightwork.